Oh. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to the second day of this great event. My name is Eva Ho. I am a general partner at a new seed fund called Susa Ventures, which we just launched last week. And it's my great pleasure to be sitting here with Gustaf Alstromer, who manages growth at Airbnb, probably one of the hottest companies out there. So welcome, Gustaf. So we'll dive right in. So what does it mean to be a product manager of growth at Airbnb? What do you do?
So at Airbnb, we grow in several different ways. We have an online marketing team, we have a brand marketing team, and we have a growth team. And the growth team is part of product. So we're about 15 people, and most of the people on our team are engineers, designers, product managers, and analysts. In some way, similar to what Facebook and other companies have built. We think in our team that our users are probably the people that tell the story the best. So we try to build tools for our users to tell the story about what Airbnb is about, the experience, the trips they go on, and after they come back. We think both in terms of kind of top of the funnel, so how do people end up on our site, and also conversion. So when someone comes to our site, how do they actually convert to become a user and a booker?
Wonderful. And just to let everyone know, we're going to allow 3 minutes at the end for audience questions, so just get ready, queue it up before we end, because I'm sure a lot of you guys want to talk to Gustaf directly. So Airbnb is growing crazy fast. It's one of the fastest growing companies in the world. How are you thinking about mobile as it inserts into that growth curve? Like, what is the role that mobile is going to play?
So mobile plays a different role for different users for us. So we have guests and we have hosts. For our hosts, mobile is, in many cases, like something they use every single day. So they use our app, they use our mobile website, but mostly our app to communicate with current guests or future guests, respond to inquiries, just manage their properties. On the guest side, mobile is more a tool when you're actually traveling. But on the guest side, the interesting thing about growth there is we obviously see a lot of mobile search growth coming in, and that increasingly is landing on our mobile website. And that's been a kind of a very continuous, strong trend lately. On the app side, it's more difficult to us to know exactly where the organic growth is coming from. We gotten pretty good at tracking the conversion track, the apps that we're getting from our own kind of links, our own emails, our own SMSs, our own mobile website. We're pretty good at knowing that. So the majority of our app growth that's organic today, we know exactly where it's coming from. But for the one we can attribute to either paid growth or our own channels, we don't know too much about that, so it's hard for us to optimize that. But in general, we see a very strong trend where mobile is taking more and more part of both the usage and the new user growth. And I think that's been, in places like Asia, it's even more significant that sometimes the majority of all the growth is coming from mobile.
And as you're building out sort of the experience across the various platforms, so from web to mobile app, how are you thinking about those experiences from a user and a host perspective? How are they different? How are they similar?
So again, for a host, one of the most important things that a host can do is be very fast in responding to inquiries. You're very likely to get a booking if you're the first person to respond to that booking. Some guests will send inquiries to a couple of different hosts, and if it takes you a couple of days to respond to that inquiry, you probably aren't going to get the booking. So one of the most important role that mobile played for hosts is just that like accessibility and immediacy of being able to kind of create a real-time marketplace. On the guest side, like I said earlier, it plays a different role, but we've seen things like last-minute booking where it's been increasing quite significantly, and that's over-indexing on mobile, so a lot of that's happening on mobile. People are using the phone to find a place to stay for that day. Our booking model hasn't been ideal for that historically, but we're doing and have done a lot of things lately to make that better.
Super. So one of the strategies that a lot of companies use is deep linking, but it's kind of new, it's kind of changing. I know it's a big part of your strategy at Airbnb for growth. Talk to us, well, define what deep linking is for the audience, and talk to us about what are you doing there, what are you experimenting with?
So deep linking, I'm sure most of you know, is a way to link straight into a certain part or certain page in your app. So for example, if you're receiving a message over email that says, respond to this inquiry, instead of clicking on that link and opening the app and then going to your inbox, you can go straight into your inbox right in our app. We love deep linking. We built an app that's really good, and we're getting a lot of inquiries coming from different channels that is not push notification. We're trying to push them into the app as much as we can. So we have implemented Android Web Intents, the Google deep linking schema, most recently app links we've seen good success with. It's just generally a much better user experience for us to send people straight into the app than send them to the mobile website. We also monitor in this space very carefully because I think there's a lot of interesting things happening right now. But at the same time, we're making our mobile website better to cater to that paid and free search traffic that we're getting coming from Google. That's increasing, and we can send that straight to the App Store. Sometimes we have to have a good landing experience on the mobile web.
Super. What's neat about Airbnb, though, what I've noticed of late, is that they've become much more transparent about sharing the strategies on how they're growing versus a company like Facebook where, I mean, they're growing obviously really fast over many, many years, but we don't really know how Facebook does it. But Airbnb has chosen to be more transparent with people like Gustaf speaking and sharing things. So you're working on lots of cool projects there. Name one that you're most excited about and what the results are.
So the most exciting thing, there's two things in the last 6 months. We launched a new version of our referrals product. So if you're a user of Airbnb, you can invite a friend of yours to join, and that person get $25 off their first trip, and me as a user get $25 off my next trip. We've had this for quite a while, but we redid and rethought it and applied and built it for mobile. So right now, you can send invites and use the product on all three platforms, web, iOS, and Android. You can redeem these invites on all three platforms as well. And if you tried it on our app, we actually built a custom landing experience for non-logged in users on mobile apps. So what that means is basically, if I send Eva an invite, if she click on that link and install our app, her first screen in the app is going to be personalized just for you. And that's without any kind of logging in or anything like that. And I think we saw conversion rates being really good for that, so I think that was a good choice. The other interesting part right now is Asia. So on the Airbnb Growth team, we're spending a lot of time on China, on Asia in particular. This is a market that's very strategic for us. And on the product side of things, we have to do a lot of changes and adaptation to make sure our product works perfectly in all these countries. We thought we knew what we were doing. In April, the whole team, 20 people, went to 4 different countries over 2.5 weeks. And we learned we actually didn't know much at all. And I think since that, we're executing on a different roadmap. And I'll give you some example. Google Play is nearly inaccessible in China. So you have to be sure that you're in the other major Android app stores. So there's 4 other major ones: Tencent, Baidu, Banduja, etc. Search is an entirely different story. Google is basically not available. You have to make sure you're indexed in Baidu and Qihoo and the other search engines. A lot of them are mobile only. Social is very different. There's no Facebook, there's no Twitter. If you link to Facebook and Twitter from your site, actually hurts your ability to get indexed in the search engine. So you want to make sure you support WeChat and Weibo. We've done all that now, and I feel like we're in a much better position now than we were 6 months ago in Asia.
That's exciting regarding Asia. So in Asia, I imagine China is very different from the other Asian countries.
Yeah. So China, the ecosystem is dramatically different than the ecosystem here, but also very different than the other Asian ecosystems. I think it's difficult to sit here and kind of think you have all the answers and know how it's different without, I think our eye openers was when the whole team was over in China and playing with our app, playing with our services. We spent 3 days meeting probably 20 companies, just listening and learning. And it was very, very helpful for us to learn like how to approach China. I think there's an excitement and need over there to use services like Airbnb. But if you're trying to make a search and Google Maps doesn't load for 30 seconds, like it's not a good experience. Like we have to fix those things.
So for folks in the audience who are working for big or small companies who are maybe a new PM that's thinking about building a mobile strategy, can you share sort of some common mistakes that a product manager might make as they're entering into sort of building a mobile side to a product?
I think give some very specific ones, but the most important thing is probably pick the right goals downloads generally is not a good goal for you to pick. You want to pick a goal that's further downstream. For us, it's bookings or nights. And we look at bookings and nights by platform, and we can see on mobile web versus app versus desktop, how does the conversion rate differs from these platforms. But it's more important that we pick that right goal instead of saying we just got another 10,000 downloads per day. Like, that's not as an important goal. The other thing for a growth PM, I would say, is make sure you focus on your growth rate. It's great to be featured in the App Store for a couple of days, but it's something that goes away, and a couple of days later you're not featured, and then you go back to the amount of kind of traffic that you were getting before. So that's not a goal that I would put. I would try to think about what is the type of growth levers to drive a long-term growth rate, and that's what we're thinking about. More specific, like give you one tactical advice, like we spend quite a bit of time we have a lot of mobile web traffic. We spend quite a bit of time trying to convert that into app usage. And we tried all kinds of experiments and A/B tests, but it turns out that if you make your prompt to download the app as similar to the Apple prompt as possible, you actually have the highest success. So don't try to be too creative. Like, try to build the UI that people are used to. That's probably what converts the best.
Interesting. So looking out 4 to 5 years from now, as both a user as well as a host, how do you see the experience changing on mobile, across all the mobile platforms? How do you feel it's going to change, without revealing too much of your roadmap, but what can we expect?
4 or 5 years is a long time in the future, but Airbnb is inherently a mobile service already. We are, compared to a lot of other services, something where the majority of experience does not happen in front of a computer. The majority of our product experience is when you check into your listing, when you stay in your listing, when you're traveling, and when you're not in front of your computer. So in that sense, mobile lends itself to our product very, very well. I think in one way, Airbnb could not have existed 10 years ago, in the same way that Uber and Lyft could not have existed if they were depending on email for delivery. So being dependent on mobile for delivery makes the marketplace more real time and more accessible, and that makes a whole difference. And I think that's going to keep being more important. The trends that we're seeing is mobile is taking over on both mobile platforms, mobile web and mobile app. And I think definitely sooner than later in that time period, we will see most of our new users coming from mobile. We'll see most of our usage being from mobile all across the world. And then we already seen that in some countries today.
Great. So we have a few minutes. Questions for Gustaf? I think there's a couple of runners running around. Yes. If you're not near a speaker, maybe. Oh, he's coming with the mic.
China, did you patent everything you have so the Chinese cannot copy you?
That's a good question. The question was, what about Chinese competitors? If you're moving into China and you're building a very local marketplace, let's say only in Shanghai, then it's much more difficult for you to compete, because generally the Chinese companies are just as good or better than the companies over here. Like when I was in Beijing, I felt that was the first place I've been to ever outside of Silicon Valley that can actually compete with Silicon Valley. It is as good or if not better than what we're doing here. I think it's called Didi Dash, which is the competitor to Uber and Lyft, which launched in China, and they're already doing millions of trips every day. Like, they raise just as much money as the companies over here. For Airbnb, it's a little bit different. We rely on a global network. Half of all of our trips are cross-country borders. If you're going to be big in China, you have to be big in every single place where Chinese travelers are going to. And they're obviously going to Thailand, to Hong Kong, and places in close to China, but they're also going to US and to France and to Europe. So it's important for a Chinese competitor to have listings and a host all over those places, and we have that. But we're not very big in China. It's a huge market. I think it was 85 million people traveled out of China last year. That's growing. It's already the biggest in the world. It's growing faster than any other big market. So it would be a huge mistake for us to ignore it and not be strategic about it. So that's what we're doing right now. But obviously, we're doing our best we can.
I think Airbnb is in every country in the world now.
We are in every country in the world.
Pretty crazy. Other questions? Anybody in the audience? Any other questions for Gustaf? Okay, great.
Great.
Well,
Right there, actually.
oh, yes.
What's your take on the sharing economy in general and where it's headed?
The question was, what's the take on sharing economy in general? I think it's a trend that we see across so many different things. Like it's when you can build, I think the basic of it comes from being able to build the kind of trust that companies like Airbnb can build online, and you have your real identity online, and you're able to trust other people online just through the platform and the network. And any other category that's useful and possible, I think that the sharing economy will prevail. And I think we've seen it in so many different categories. For Airbnb, I think we always had the opportunity to do many different things, like there's been boats and cars and all kinds of things on the platform, but we decided to focus on travel and trips. So that's where our focus is. So for us, anything that can be kind of captured in the idea of a trip or a travel, that's probably what we're going to do. And that's big enough. That is probably the biggest, or if one of the biggest of those markets.
Any other questions? Oh, right here.
When you're tuning the app for growth, how do you do user testing?
The question is, when we tune in the app for growth, how do we do user testing? That's a great question. I think when you use web, there's two main ways to do user testing on web. There's services like usertesting.com, and there is just having people in your office doing testing for you. Both of those are pretty good. They serve different purposes. For mobile, it's easier to get people in the office. It's harder to do something like usertesting.com for mobile. So we actually do usertesting.com. That's something we've been using for mobile. We've played around with things like lookback.io, which is an SDK that allows you to record the face of the person when you're doing that testing. And then we're also having a lot of people coming to the office. I think it's critical that you rely on both qualitative and quantitative data. So both looking at what people are saying and doing with your app and looking at the user testing and looking at a lot of the metrics, because the metrics won't tell you everything. They'll tell you a good story, but it won't tell you everything. So we definitely rely on both of those.
Super. I think there's one more question, but I think we're out of time. So just come find us afterwards. Sorry about that. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Gustaf, for being with us.